brighter spotlight, darker inside. Escaping emptiness with spotlights and wine might just lead you further astray. I used to believe I deserved it all. The money, the recognition, the admiring glances, the red wine in crystal glasses, the luxury suites on the top floors. I truly believed this was my rightful reward for years spent on the margins. And when the lights turned on me, I didn't flinch. I walked into the center smiling, toasting, quickly learning how to become a man of success. 3-hour dinners, last-minute business class flights, custom-tailored suits. Every meeting, someone stood to shake my hand. Every airport, a private car awaited. I wasn't living for purpose anymore. I was living for the experience. Each morning, I woke to a city view, handcrafted espresso, new messages from partners, and the feeling that I've made it out. No one asked if what I was doing still felt meaningful. The gleam of success drowned out all such questions. I began to believe that indulgence was just part of growing up, that after everything, I had earned the right to go big, that living too modestly felt out of place in this world, that I didn't always have to be someone's moral compass. I could be free, wild, unapologetically extravagant. And so, I started living like every day was a celebration. No one stopped me. In fact, people admired it. They called me Victor the Inspiring One. But they didn't know. Right after leaving the stage, I'd be checking which clubs were open till dawn. I didn't call it escape. I called it rewarding myself. A $500 dinner, a spontaneous trip to a European beach, a beautiful woman calling me the man every guy wants to be. And I believed it. Believed I was living it right. Believed all this was well-earned. No one knew that at night, alone in a massive room, I sometimes felt hollow. But I never let it last long. I turned the music up, ordered another drink, opened my phone, checked who mentioned my name that day, and the emptiness, gone. Gone temporarily. I thought if I kept up this pace, I'd outrun the feeling of not belonging, of fear, of doubt. But the faster I ran, the more I needed to add something in to fill the growing void. Money, parties, people, praise, power, and eventually, it all became a habit. A habit dressed as success, but underneath, just exhaustion hiding behind lights and noise. The man who thought a little indulgence wouldn't hurt. I used to believe it's okay to take a break. I've earned this. A week in Las Vegas, it was just a small reward after months of nonstop work, pitching, traveling, and sleepless nights. Successful friends told me, "Dude, you need a trip. Live it up." So I did. No more cautious, calculated Victor. That week, I lived like money wasn't real. I chose the most expensive hotel, top-floor suite, Michelin dinners, vintage French wine, limousines, high-stakes tables, and, of course, women. Everything I'd only seen on TV, I was living it. I never thought I'd become addicted to that feeling so fast. Vegas lights don't just shine, they seduce. The music, the laughter, the slot machines spinning non-stop create a floating world where time doesn't exist. And me with a subtle emptiness already inside, I surrendered completely. I didn't think about goals, or values, or purpose. I only thought about what next thrill I could reach. A bigger bet, a finer drink, a suite with an outdoor tub. A night beside someone whose name I'd never know but who looked perfect and laughed on cue. I called it blowing off steam. But really, I was doing what so many do when they don't want to face themselves. Find a new high to forget the old hole. And so the loop began. If I felt a tinge of sadness, I booked a flight. If I felt lonely, I called more friends. If I sensed meaninglessness, I turned up the music and poured another drink. I thought I was living to the fullest. In truth, I was running but dressed it up in suits and expensive watches. I remember one night, walking out of a famous club with some new friends. Cool Vegas breeze, lights still dancing. A woman clung to my arm and said, "You're really something. Guys like you, rare." I smiled, but deep down, I felt hollow. I wasn't special. I was just a version of myself wrapped in cash and charm. We got in the car. Music blasted again. I sat there, surrounded by beauty, in a luxury ride, in a city that never sleeps. And for the first time, the thought crossed my mind. If I lost it all tomorrow, who here would stay? I pushed that question aside with more wine and louder jokes. And just like that, the night carried on. I used to think, a little break, one big week, some wild living wouldn't change anything. But that little indulgence became the first step of a fall I couldn't stop. A night you wake up from and can't remember what you said. I used to think I had it all under control. No matter how wild the party got, I'd be the one who stayed sharp, who knew when to stop. That was the story I told myself. Until the night that shattered the illusion. It was the 5th night in Vegas. I don't remember how much I drank. There was wine, cocktails, champagne, and something I didn't ask the name of. My friend just said, "Trust me, it's worth trying once." Music blared, lights flashed. I laughed, danced, talked to dozens of people, but I can't recall a single conversation. When I woke up, I was lying on a leather couch in a hotel suite I didn't recognize. Sunlight slipped through half-closed curtains. My head throbbed, shirt wrinkled, phone almost dead. I looked around. Someone was sleeping on the armchair. Another curled up on the floor. A pair of heels lay abandoned near the coffee table. An empty bottle rested on the counter. I tried to remember the night before. My mind was blank. Not fuzzy, blank. I didn't know what I'd said, what I'd done, who I was with. I walked into the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, stared at myself, hair messy, eyes bloodshot, lips dry, and the look in my eyes empty. I told myself, probably just tired. Then, it was just one night. Everybody has those. I was making excuses. I knew it, but I wasn't ready to face it. Instead of sitting down and reflecting, I called room service, ordered breakfast, picked out a fresh suit. I checked my calendar, replied to emails. I acted like nothing happened. And strangely, that routine helped. It let me ignore the feeling just enough. Because if I'd let it linger a minute longer, I might have cried. Not because of anything specific, just the quiet knowing. I'd crossed some invisible line, and I didn't know if I could ever go back. That afternoon, I joined a few new friends at the hotel bar. They laughed as they recounted the night. "You stood on the table and yelled something hilarious," one of them said, grinning. "We can't remember what it was, though." I forced a smile. I didn't remember either. Another lifted her glass. "Welcome to the high life," she said. I clinked my glass against hers. But inside, something fell silent. That night, back in my room, I looked in the mirror again. My face looked the same, but something in my eyes wasn't. Not loud, not obvious, but enough for me to know. I had begun losing something deeper than just control. From that point on, nothing felt like reward anymore. I didn't go out because I wanted joy. I went out because I didn't want to be alone with myself. I didn't call it a breakdown, but it was the first time I looked in the mirror and didn't know who was staring back. The moments you deserve most can take you furthest from your values. Some things begin with the most reasonable excuses, the most deserved reasons. A party after closing a big deal, a new watch to reward a brutal month, a weekend escape because I've been working too hard. And slowly, without noticing I deserve this, becomes routine. I thought I was simply enjoying the rewards, but in truth, I had wandered far from where I started. Parties stopped feeling special. They became the norm. Invites didn't make me think, I just said yes. Waking up late, head pounding, mouth dry no longer caused panic. I was used to it. It wasn't pressure. I chose this. And at first, it still felt good. But some nights, sitting at lavish tables, music blasting, laughter surrounding me, my mind drifted elsewhere. I started wondering, do these people around me care about who I really am, or just the image I put on display? I had no answer. All I knew was that every time I felt uneasy, I told myself I deserved to be happy. So I kept going to parties, kept spending, kept smiling, talking, toasting, then returning to my hotel room alone where no one knew what I was thinking. Sometimes, while taking off my shoes, I'd quietly ask, why am I even here? But that question always got drowned out by tomorrow's calendar notification. And I kept moving. I began to see it clearly. It wasn't that I didn't know I was drifting. I just didn't want to stop. Stopping meant facing the hollow space I'd ignored for over a year. So I kept going and justified it with a sweet phrase. I've struggled. I've worked hard. I deserve this. I used to believe everyone deserves comfort after effort. Now I know the moments you feel most deserving are when you're most vulnerable to drift. Because in those moments, you relax. You compromise. You stop asking, is this still aligned with who I am? And one day you look back and you're miles away from the thing you once called your purpose. Not because of a fall, but because of 1,000 tiny steps. I don't blame my past. I just wish I'd woken up earlier. But most people only learn this lesson after they've paid the price of unconsciousness. And that lesson often begins with one harmless sounding phrase, I deserve a little break. Keeping the image of success or stepping out from behind the curtain? I started growing tired of the role I used to wear like a badge of honor. Every time I stepped onto a stage, microphone in hand, looking out at hundreds of expectant eyes, I felt hollow. It wasn't that I lacked experience. It was that I wasn't sure my life was still worth sharing. One day, I got an invitation to speak at a major tech conference on the East Coast. Hundreds of founders, CEOs, investors, a big opportunity. My manager messaged me, "This is your moment. Don't miss it." I said yes. But all week, I couldn't write a single line. Each time I opened my laptop, something tightened in my chest. I'd type a few thoughts, then delete them. I considered sharing my startup journey, but I'd told that story so many times, and even I didn't believe in the polished version anymore. I thought about speaking on purpose and core values, but deep down, I knew I hadn't lived by those in a long time. So what would I say? I could keep playing the part, put on the suit, smile with ease, tell rehearsed stories, say the words the audience wanted to hear. Or I could step out from behind the curtain and admit I was lost. I stood between two doors. One led to applause, prestige, relevance. The other uncertainty, but maybe something honest. I didn't know which to choose. My ego shouted louder than my truth. Fame was sweeter than authenticity, and my fear of being exposed outweighed my desire to be real. I asked myself, if I told the truth, would anyone still admire me? That question kept me from walking off stage. I used to believe authenticity was bravery, but now I saw sometimes it's terrifying, especially when you've grown used to being loved for a version of yourself that no longer exists. So I chose to perform. I rewrote my usual lines, rehearsed my delivery, built the perfect slides. I walked on stage, smiled, spoke, inspired. Afterward, I got the applause, the handshakes, the dinner invites, the glowing emails. But back in my hotel room, I sat in the dark, and I whispered 3 words to no one. Is it too late? I didn't have an answer. I only knew I had just stepped off stage, but it felt like I'd stepped even further away from myself. You can't inspire others if you've lost the will to live your own life. I used to think all you needed was a good story, strong delivery, and the right energy to inspire people. But people don't just listen with their ears. They feel with their instincts. And those instincts will sense instantly when you're saying words you no longer believe. That day at the big conference, it was one of the most applauded talks I'd ever given. Gray suit, warm lights, steady voice. I shared my startup journey with humor, humility, and a carefully timed pause for emotion. The crowd laughed. They nodded. They took notes. And when I finished, they stood and clapped. I smiled, thanked them, took photos, answered interviews. But inside, all I could feel was this. I had just performed, not because the story was fake, not because the facts were wrong, but because the man telling it didn't feel real. I told my story like a film that had been edited too many times. I skipped the sleepless nights, the fear, the breakdowns. I polished the wins, threw in impressive numbers. I used words to hide the doubt growing in my chest. When someone asked, "What keeps you grounded in your purpose?" I replied with a rehearsed line, "I never forget where I came from." But the truth was, I had. I no longer felt connected to the original reason. I didn't know if what I was doing still created real value. So I started repeating myself. Same stories, same lessons, same delivery. Like an actor who knows the script so well, he no longer needs to feel the lines. When you've lost your own will to live fully, you can't inspire anyone else, no matter how powerful your voice sounds. The audience may applaud, but what lingers afterward is emptiness. And the speaker walks away with it too. I remember sitting at dinner with a group of young entrepreneurs afterward. They asked everything: funding, scaling, staying passionate. I answered, clearly, confidently, but not one word came from a place I cared about. It wasn't their fault. I just didn't want to say anything at all. I wanted silence. I wanted to go back to my hotel. I wanted to sit in a room where no one expected me to be admirable. But I stayed, because once the roll starts, you forget how to exit. I once read a line that said, "Some souls don't die from pain. They die from pretending for too long." Back then, I didn't get it. Now, I saw myself in it. You can go far with a good smile and polished skills. But if your heart doesn't see itself in the words you say, then it's all just an empty shell. I thought it was my job to inspire, but now I understand. You can't inspire others if you've lost the will to live your own life. A party with no end, and no one left at the end. I used to think hitting rock bottom would be dramatic. A big crash, a public failure, something that would wake me up, make me change course. But no, sometimes rock bottom isn't an explosion. It's a party that went on too long. A party where everyone arrives loud and fast, drinks deep, laughs hard, and then, one by one, slips away. Until you look around, and the only thing left is broken glass and silence. That night, I threw an early birthday party at a rented penthouse in Los Angeles. Everything was perfect: private DJ, custom cocktails, guest chef. The guest list sparkled with founders, influencers, magazine-featured names. I dressed sharp, smiled at the right moments, answered questions about my latest project, clinked glasses, gave the expected toasts, just like always. But around 3 a.m., as the music faded and the staff began to tidy up, I looked around and realized there was no one left I truly wanted to talk to. Not because they were bad people, but because I had nothing left to say. I sat on the sofa, drink in hand, staring through the tall windows at the city. The lights flickered. The streets still buzzed. But something inside me had shut off completely. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet chill running through my spine. I walked barefoot onto the balcony. The wind was soft, LA still glowing below, but my mind was empty. No one texted to ask if I got home okay. No one checked in to see if I was still up. No one asked, "Hey, are you all right?" I stood there in a $1 million suite with expensive wine in hand, overlooking a city of dreams, and felt completely alone. I had never felt loneliness like that. There's a cruel truth. People rarely admit you don't feel most alone when you fail. You feel most alone when everything looks bright on the outside, but no one truly sees you. I thought of my parents. That tiny kitchen, the wobbly dinner table, dinners of scrambled eggs and leftover mashed potatoes from the day before. But when we looked into each other's eyes, there was love. Now, I look into the eyes of people at these parties, and I see nothing. I look at myself in the mirrored walls of the penthouse, and I see nothing either. I had gone too far, not in distance, but far from the things that once made me feel real. I couldn't remember the last time I did something without hoping someone would clap. I couldn't remember the last time I felt full without a party, a compliment, or a new deal. I slid down to the floor, back against the wall, silence growing. Only the faint wind outside remained. And I whispered, "Have I gone too far?" No one answered. Decay doesn't always begin with a mistake. It begins with the smallest permission. I never thought I'd become someone who lived just to indulge. No one starts out aiming for that. I was once the kid clinging to a worn-out programming book like it was gold. The kid who coded through the night without needing recognition. Who whispered, "If just one person finds this useful, that's enough." But things changed. Not with a crash, but with tiny shifts too subtle to notice. I remember the first time I rewarded myself with an expensive dinner. I told myself, just this once. And yes, it was just once. Until the second time. And the third, then it became normal. I stopped seeing the difference between a celebration and a habit. Anytime I felt tired, I bought something deserved. Luxury shoes, $1,000 meal, a first-class flight to somewhere I didn't care about, just to sit alone in a hotel room, scrolling to see what people were saying about me. No one stopped me, because from the outside, Victor was just enjoying life. And I told myself that too. But deep down, I felt less and less. Each new purchase thrilled me for a shorter time. Each party made me laugh a little less. Each grander hotel room made me feel a little emptier. Still, I kept going. Because I didn't know how to stop. Because I had gotten used to it. Because stopping meant facing myself. I used to think decay looked dramatic. Scandal, loss, collapse. But it's quieter than that. It begins with permission. A night where you skip your values. A moment where you say, "I don't need a reason." And one tiny shift at a time, you lose sight of how far you've drifted from what's right. I don't blame anyone. I just wish someone had asked me, "Does this truly make you happy?" Not, "You're so successful," or "I love your lifestyle," but a question that went deeper. No one asked, because even I hadn't asked myself. And what I eventually learned is this: the downward spiral rarely starts with a wrong decision. It begins with the smallest allowances, the ones we think don't matter. But every "just this once" carries a price. Not a recovery, but the beginning of a beautifully crafted mask. I used to think that once you hit rock bottom, you'd change. But that's not always true. Sometimes hitting bottom doesn't lead to healing. It just leads to a better disguise. I didn't stop. I just found new ways to make sure no one saw the cracks inside. I went back on stage. This time, I looked even more polished. My speeches flowed smoother. My suits were sharper. I even started talking about mental health and work-life balance like I actually understood those things. But the truth was, I no longer felt any of it. Every time I opened my mouth, it felt like I was acting. And with each passing day, I got better at the role. I knew when to smile, when to pause for effect, when to get emotional just enough to seem real, but not too much to reveal the emptiness underneath. I built a version of Victor that looked perfect. Successful, seasoned, wise. Someone who had failed, learned, grown. That version was adored by audiences, trusted by partners, celebrated by media. But every night, back in my hotel room, as I took off the perfect suit, I looked in the mirror and didn't know the man staring back. I didn't hate the man on stage. I just no longer recognized him. The mask wasn't just a cover anymore. It was becoming me. And what scared me most was that I started to believe it. I talked about being authentic. When I was the best liar in the room, I preached living your values. When I couldn't even remember mine, I didn't know the last time I did something without asking, what will people think of this? Rebirth, in my mind, used to mean a powerful awakening, a turning point, a rush of clarity. But my reality was just layers of illusion, refined, streamlined, painless, and empty. Every choice I made came from fear. Fear of losing relevance, of falling from grace, of stepping out of the spotlight. I began to feel cold, not from the air, but from being surrounded by praise and not hearing a single true voice inside me. Do you know what's truly terrifying? Not being misunderstood by others, but misunderstanding yourself for so long that you forget what's real. I didn't know how far I drifted from my real self. I just knew I was no longer the boy with the beat-up keyboard or the young man who trembled with joy when his first line of code actually ran. I wasn't even the guy who smiled after helping someone fix a simple bug. Now, I was just a hollow figure who knew how to talk about inspiration. And that quiet pain, no one could see it. Because I still dressed well, showed up on time, shook hands, told good stories. But deep down, I knew one thing with certainty. I no longer believed what I was saying. And that kind of fatigue runs the deepest. When no one notices you're breaking, maybe you've been broken for a long time. I used to believe that if one day I started to fall apart, someone would notice. A close friend, a lover, an old teammate. Someone would touch my shoulder and say, "Hey, you're not okay. I can see it." But nobody said a thing. No one at all. People kept praising my confidence, sharing my posts, quoting words I didn't even believe in anymore, still calling me an inspiration. And me? I kept nodding, kept smiling, kept playing the part. But every night, when the lights went out, when it was just me, I knew clearly I had broken long ago. Only I broke silently. You can live for a long time with cracks inside, as long as you know how to cover them beautifully. I was better at that than anyone, and I was proud of my ability to keep it together, believing that if I just worked harder, everything would be okay. But some things aren't okay. Not because you're weak, but because you're not true. I used to fear the emptiness, so I filled it with busyness, with reputation, with spotlights, with applause. But that didn't make it disappear. It just made me forget who I once was. No one noticed I'd changed, because all they saw was the polished new version, sharper, brighter, smoother in his words. They didn't see the man inside, shrinking day by day, confused, exhausted. I don't blame them. I just regret that even I no longer recognize myself. One early morning, before a live television interview, I stood staring into the mirror. And for the first time in years, I admitted something. I wasn't okay. Not because I lacked success, not because I lacked money, not because I lacked companionship, but because I'd lost a part of my soul in trying to maintain the image of an ideal man. In that moment, I didn't cry. I didn't break down. I just stood still for a long time. And for the first time, I stopped performing. Not in real life, but in my own mind. And I knew if I didn't start to change even slowly, I'd continue living like a shadow that knew how to speak. No one would notice. No one would question. No one would ask me to stop because I'd gotten too good at convincing everyone that I was fine. And sometimes, that is the most dangerous thing of all.
My father once wrote in an old journal, "Every man will have a moment where he feels invincible, but that's when he's most at risk of losing himself." At 24, he lived brighter than anyone I've ever known. Successful, admired, living in a world most people only dream of. But that was also the age he started losing things no one could see. From the inside out. Not because he was weak, but because sometimes the world gets so loud, you can no longer hear your own voice. If you've ever felt drained under the spotlight, ever smiled without joy, ever succeeded and still felt alone, then maybe you'll understand my father. And maybe you need to pause too, just to hear yourself again. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story. Hello everyone, I'm Lily, the youngest daughter of Victor Dominic. My father shared these stories, not to be remembered, but to remind us. Everyone deserves a new beginning, even the broken ones. Some names and places have been changed for privacy, but Free Your Soul is real, and it's the most precious legacy he left us. Today, I'm sharing it with you, hoping it reaches someone who needs a quiet, gentle whisper. Thank you for listening with your heart. I'll see you in the next stories.